Welcome to another episode of the Bank Free Blueprint Podcast. Today I have with me a good friend and coach of mine that I've known for 7-8 years now, Mary Beltrami. Welcome, Mary.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, Tom.
Yeah, very cool to have you. You and I met a while back, about 7 or 8 years ago. It was actually, I can tell you, I know it was the summer of 2010.
It was actually March of 2010 when I met you at the event where we first, came together, and then we started coaching just shortly after that.
Yeah. So I was having some pretty relatively challenging times, I would say. I had been pretty well beat up by the downturn, and you were one of the coaches at one of the workshops that I went to. It was on private lending and trust deed investing, that type of thing. And I just remember from the first time I met you that I just really noticed your energy and your presence and your ability to really connect very quickly with people. And obviously those are some amazing traits for someone who is a business and life coach. And so I want to thank you, first of all, for the all the support and all the things that you've helped me out with over the last 7.5 years. Almost 8 years now.
Almost 8 years, yeah.
Yeah. So welcome to the show. You have been a business and life coach now for close to a dozen years.
Yeah.
And I imagine you have all kinds of different stories you can share. I know you've done, unlike some coaches that don't have quite as many clients, you have had well over 100 clients. I'm guessing it could even be.
I would say over 1,000. Because of the way I've structured my coaching, that I've tapped into other programs that then provide me a good number of clients to work with. So through that process, I've actually coached hundreds and hundreds, and I would say at this point, well over 1,000.
Wow, that's amazing. That's a lot of people's lives you've touched and helped. So that's very cool. What I'd like to do is maybe just talk a little bit about some of the things, and part of this will probably come from my experiences and our experiences of working together. But when I was going through my challenges, you had some advice, you had some ways of working with me and helping me get to that next level. And that's obviously what you've done with many of your hundreds and hundreds of clients you've worked with. One of the things that seems to be really consistent is, regardless of whether somebody's gone through really tough times way down at the bottom, or even maybe not so tough times, but there's this element of being stuck in where we are at in our lives. And kind of, maybe some are, I would maybe say some may be called in a funk or in that type of a situation, but there are some that are just like, it's really hard to get going to that next level and get moving. So do you have, I know that's really a broad premise or a broad sort of a structure, a place to start from, but what are some of the things that you think about or do, or strategies that you work with when you are doing your coaching and mentoring, and how do you help people get past that? Maybe if you even have a couple of examples of things.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, whenever I'm coaching you or anybody, I recognize, first of all, that I am you. I am my client. So there's nothing that I'm going to ask of you that I really can't or shouldn't be asking of myself. And so oftentimes, I see my own clients reflecting back to me some of my own stuff, that I always and continually have to work on. And so, from that perspective, I'm really no different, but, I have training, I have experience. And so, with that skill and that experience, I'm able then to take what I know and then, translate that and help others, say move through if we're dealing with being stuck, that situation. So let me just say, for example, I've just come through a major, I would say, transition out of stuckness for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality is it happens to all of us. This is a very human thing. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. We may think or frame it in such a way that it's a negative, but in fact, because it is something that we all go through, it's important to frame it in such a way, if you are framing it in a negative way, because it can feel very uncomfortable, very
Mm-hmm.
dissatisfying, very disheartening, frustrating, so there's a lot of kind of negative, um, say, descriptives that you
Mm-hmm.
may assign to that experience. But in fact, what I've learned and what I try to help my clients with is to reframe it in such a way that it really is offering an opportunity. It's sort of the wake up call, because we know when we're stuck, we get to that point where we're stuck and it's like, wow, this doesn't feel good. But
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we're so, we've gotten ourselves perhaps in such a pattern of behavior and our choices that keep us doing the same old that, don't actually help us move out of that stuckness.
Right.
So first of all, it's just recognizing, what, I'm stuck. I'm in this funk, or I'm in this stuck place. And, then to be willing to look at, what's got me here, and what is keeping me here, what's reinforcing, the ongoing stuckness. So, one of the things that, I, for myself and also for my clients, it's really looking at, okay, what got me here? And most often it is something to do with the past.
Mm-hmm.
And what is being asked of me or asked of the client is to let go of the past. And I know that's an easy thing to say, not so easy to do,
Right.
especially when you're still processing a lot of the emotional content of that, past.
Mm-hmm.
But it is the starting place. Is what am I holding on to that I really need to let go of? Because
Mm-hmm.
it's in that process of letting go, that you begin to free yourself from that stuck place.
And so in the example that you have of yourself of what you went through recently, and I just want to touch on this, the idea of, and I'm glad you brought this up, the idea of suffering being good or bad. I always, I try to, especially when I'm going through things that I don't like, I try to think of it from the perspective of, it's not necessarily good or bad. Suffering is a drag. Suffering is not fun. Suffering is painful, but it isn't necessarily bad. And so if we can get to that point of understanding the difference between uncomfortable or not feeling like it's the best place to be versus good or bad, because like you shared, there's so much growth in those times where things are a challenge. And so to me, that helps me sometimes when I'm in that space of good and bad, to pull myself out of that and maybe reframe it to more of a growing or not growing or that type of thing. So yeah, so thank you for bringing that up. And in your case, I mean, you had the situation where you well, I'll let you describe it, but again, the growth that comes from that type of a situation, even though it's no fun, is
Yeah.
can be amazing.
Yeah. So in my case, I suffered an injury that severely impacted and affected the nerves in my wrist and in my left hand.
Hmm.
And, you know, the first, if you're familiar with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's 5 stages of grief,
Hmm.
I absolutely recognize that has what I've been going through. It was almost a year ago that I suffered this injury, and the first year I'm just in shock, and then it's really almost it's denial. It's like
Hmm.
this cannot be happening, because for me, as I'm very big into cycling and very active, typically, very,
Hmm.
involved in a lot of athletics. To not have my left hand available to me, and you just have no idea what it's like to suddenly be one-handed, and the things you just take for granted. So I just was in this state of denial for a while, and then it really became anger, just angry at the situation. And then then the next phase in the stages of grief is really kind of a bargaining, kind of bargaining with God. Well, if you do this for me, I'll do this, and I promise to do that.
Right.
You can go through this weird kind of bargaining, and when you realize that's not working, and for me, I spent months in very intensive rehabilitation. And, I'm just the absolute compliant patient doing everything that I'm told to do. The surgeon couldn't have been more pleased up until a certain point in time. I was doing everything, making great progress. And then I hit this point in my recovery where nothing was happening.
Uh,
And I just felt so defeated because I had worked so hard and, many times just in a lot of pain to get through that. And I just, then I fell into really a depression. So what I discovered in the depression was really that it was ultimately, and this is another point that I really try to stress when I'm working with clients around getting unstuck, is what are you resisting?
mhm.
Very often our stuckness is really, around something that we're really resisting and not wanting to accept. And, I did not want to accept in my situation, I did not want to accept that I was not going to recover or recover to the extent that I was expecting. And that then I had to just go through this process of really kind of sitting with myself, being with myself. And, at first I just, kind of fell into this depression, but that wasn't getting me anywhere and that
Yeah.
wasn't helping. But then I got stuck there and I just was kind of floundering and I couldn't move and I couldn't find my energy and all of that just compounded. So what as a coach, very often what I'm looking for when I'm working with clients is, what kind of pattern interrupt, if there's a pattern of behavior that's going on that's not serving them, that may have them stuck or, whatever their issue is, I'm looking for, what can I help them create as a pattern interrupt to break
Mm,
that, maybe that negative pattern and to get shifted into a better pattern that supports them. So what I recognized for myself is I needed a major pattern interrupt for myself.
I see.
And so I, then I went about looking for that pattern interrupt to implement.
Okay, and if we can just step back to the 5 stages,
Yes.
shock, denial, anger. Um,
So it's denial. Well, her 5 stages are denial.
okay.
First I was just in shock, and then you come out of that, and then now you're going through. What I really had to do was grieve the loss of my left hand, and
Hmm.
so there was denial, and then there was anger, and
Yeah.
then there was this kind of bargaining, and then it really fell into a depression. And then as I implemented the pattern interrupt and I really started to make some shifts, really then the final stage is acceptance. And I would
Mm,
say that's where I'm at now. I finally got to the point where, with or without the full use of my left hand, I'm okay. I'll be
hmm.
okay. It won't stop me from living my best life. It won't stop me from living my purpose. And once I really got that, it's like all the, all engines go now.
Hmm. Hmm. When you learned about those 5 stages, and I don't know if you knew about them before you went through your process or
Yeah.
not, but I've heard of them in the past as well. But would you say that for you it was more beneficial to know about those stages as you're going through your processes because you can recognize it? I know that once I realized that, it was easier for me to logically understand why I was feeling the way I was feeling when I was going through all of those, when I had my losses in right around 2008, 9, 10, whatever. So
Yes, so I have a master's in psychology, and so I did, I had studied that, and I actually worked with
wow,
hospice patients and their families. So, I have some experience around, grief work as well.
certainly.
But certainly, when you have that kind of context and understanding, what it really does and affords you is some level of compassion for your own experience and for
Uh,
yourself. You say, gosh, I'm not really just going crazy or insane, that grief actually does have its own life cycle. And
Mm-hmm.
these are the natural phases of grief. And, grief isn't just losing a loved one, it's losing the capacity to work, and live with my left hand the way I was used to, or losing, a business,
Mm-hmm.
or anything significant in your life, a
Mm-hmm.
relationship. So, grief comes in all forms, but there are some very natural phases and stages of grief. And,
Mm-hmm.
she just really understood and laid those out. And it was helpful for me. I didn't always see it in the moment because, I might have just been too angry.
Mm-hmm.
But when I could step back and really gain that perspective, it made a lot more sense.
So once you get to that point of realizing that, maybe, if I understand correctly, that you got to the point where you realized that it was time for a pattern interrupt.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what did you use as your pattern interrupt?
So one of the things that I recognized what in my depression was, first of all, I had moved away from my normal healthy eating and nutrition habits, as
Mm-hmm.
well as moving. I just couldn't even physically get myself to move. It's like I rejected this part of my body, that, and I just like I somehow that translated. I'm not even going to move. As part of the resistance. And so the pattern interrupt that I chose was to do actually a cleanse. And in this cleanse, it's called the Master Cleanse. It's been out there for many, many years. I had heard about it. I've done some juice cleanses before, but nothing this extreme. But I
Mm-hmm.
felt like for me and the place I was in, I needed something kind of radical.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I looked into it. I talked to some friends of mine who swear by it and do it, 2 or 3 times a year. And I thought, you know what, this is what I need, because I looked at it not just for my body, but, if this was going to be a physical cleanse, a mental cleanse, an emotional cleanse, a spiritual cleanse. And so I really took it on like that. And I committed to myself, you know, do or die. I mean, I am going to do this. I don't care, I don't care. Yeah, I don't care what it is that I'm going to experience. I'm moving through this, and
Mm-hmm.
I committed to it, and I did, and I was just blown away at the transformation that what I really occurred in that process. Now, I do think I had the right mental framework for that. I was prepared and
Well,
committed, but
well,
it was transformative.
it takes a bit of commitment and clarity of intent, or clarity of determination to do what. That's a
Yeah, because
pretty hefty cleanse exercise that you did. Could
Yeah,
you
because it
describe
was,
it?
I mean, yeah. So it's a minimum of 10 days. I went on for 13 days, and then there's a few days of transition, getting the body ready to take solid food again. But literally, it was just living on water, fresh squeezed organic lemon juice or lime juice, maple syrup. And during the day, it's 6 to 10, 12 times a day. I would heat up about 10 ounces of water, add 2 tablespoons of fresh squeezed lemon juice, 2 tablespoons of natural, organic, pure maple syrup.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what I survived on, or lived on. And I was, I personally didn't think that, and that's why I resisted this cleanse for so many years, because I thought, I just don't believe that that's going to work.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just amazed at how well it did work. And then in the evenings, I would drink a very mild laxative tea.
Mm-hmm.
And in the morning, first thing upon awakening on an empty stomach, I would heat up a quart of warm water with 2 teaspoons of, I use Celtic sea salt, and I did basically a flush.
Mm-hmm.
And what that did is basically take everything from the day that, because the lemon or the lime, those are cleansing agents, and they go
Mm-hmm.
into the organs, and they go in and into the digestive system and break down and pull out and extract all the toxins and all the waste that's sitting in there.
Mm-hmm.
And then, that morning kind of flush kind of cleans out your system, and then you
Mm-hmm.
go through another cycle of taking in all the the cleansing agent, basically, which is great nutrition with the lemon and lime, and the minerals that you get from the maple syrup.
Mm-hmm.
and you just keep, repeat and rinse, it's just the same thing.
Yeah.
And again, it's a minimum of 10 days, but I felt, I knew in my own sense that I would know when I was complete, because the doctor says you can do this all the way, up to 40 days.
Mm-hmm.
And, I wasn't going to go that extreme, but by day 13, I just knew I'm complete now. And so
Yeah.
then I started the 2 or 3 day transition.
Well, that is quite the commitment. I know I've done 3 days of that fast. I've never made it, but you've inspired me to give it to do that at some point here.
Yeah.
It's interesting how our body can really handle a lot more, or maybe in this case less,
Yeah.
than what we think, and so
Yeah.
it just
It was amazing, and I watched very carefully. I was very observant at just my own physiological
mhm,
responses. But then, even with that, I was just amazed at how much energy I was gaining, and learning how to manage. When I would start to feel hungry, all you need to do is go make another, these,
mhm,
drink. The lemonade. It's also called the lemonade diet, and instantly, because you're pulling in all the nutrition in liquid form, so it doesn't need any time to break down in the digestive process, so it immediately gets into the blood and into your brain. So I might be starting to feel hunger,
mhm,
and as soon as I would drink that, within a minute or two, every sensation of hunger diminished. I never had a food craving.
mhm,
And in fact, having gone through the cleanse, I lost all cravings for, say, any kind of processed food, sugar, refined sugar,
mhm,
alcohol, anything. It took it all away. And all I
mhm,
really craved at any point was I wanted more vegetables.
mhm. Yeah.
And
Wow.
so, what that's done is kickstart me back into, what had been a normal eating pattern for me. I do a lot of green smoothies in the morning. I'm probably 75, 80% plant-based in my diet. I'm
Mhm.
not a full vegetarian, but, so I have
Yeah.
a little bit of lean protein. But just getting back into my normal eating, and then I started moving again. I invested in a very nice elliptical trainer. I've been on that machine every single day since I
Yeah.
started the cleanse as well.
Very
And I did have to moderate my activity somewhat, just because I tend, because of my kind of athletic background,
mhm.
I can go full
Yeah.
force, and so I had to kind of scale that back and just go gently with my body. But I was able to do all my daily exercise, and my activities was just my normal activities with, energy and vitality. So
Okay.
for me, it was really a profound pattern interrupt on many levels.
Very cool. If you think about what it takes to do something like that, I mean, again, that's that. I heard you say that you didn't crave or you weren't hungry, but I believe I'm going to guess that also had to do with the fact that you had a a total commitment to making it through to getting it done. And so if you had let your mind wander into the food areas, whatever, or kind of not have, if you didn't have the rigorous discipline that you have, that might have been a little bit more of a challenge too, I'm guessing. But I say that because I know that with your coaching style, the way you do your coaching, uh, I would describe it as rigorous accountability. I mean,
Exactly.
that's what you are committed to creating with your client, is accountability and no excuses, and just really getting to get the job done.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I come from the mindset that when I make a commitment, it's as good as done. It's as
Hmm.
good as done in the moment I make the commitment. So, so having the right mindset and the right commitment level,
Hmm.
which really, in my frame, it's, if I commit to something, it's done.
Hmm.
It's
And
done.
how does a listener, how do we get to that point of building that? And I would think that it's almost like a form of building. It's like going to the gym and lifting weights and
Mhm.
eventually getting that stamina and that strength and that everything that it takes to be able to get to that next level. What are some steps, or what do you have any recommended steps or processes or ways of being that would help the listener maybe start developing that, or at least being aware of it and getting to the point where that can be a part of their lives or our lives?
Yeah, I think you make a great, it's the great analogy with building muscle. You know, in terms of accountability, we have essentially an accountability muscle, and the more you work it, the stronger it gets or it becomes. And so, one of the ways that I work with clients to build their stronger accountability muscle or a stronger accountability muscle, and oftentimes I work with people who come in and have very weak accountability. And in fact, I'm working with a client right now who, very bright, very capable, sharp as a tack. I mean, I just oozing with potential. But his, as I started working with him, his follow through and accountability was pathetic.
Hmm.
And I really just had to put it right there in his face. He knew it. He said, but and I've worked with other coaches, and I just nobody's been able to really get me past this. So I said, all right, well, first of all, you have to tell me, are you prepared at this point in time, never mind the past, but are you prepared at this point in time to make a firm commitment? Because it all starts with your commitment. And he said, yes. I said, okay, so let's look at what you're willing to do to demonstrate that commitment,
Hmm.
because, all our commitment is demonstrated through our actions and behavior. And so we talked about some things, but ultimately what he arrived at was, I would like to be able to submit to you on a daily basis. So, this is where if you don't have a coach, finding a good accountability buddy or person
Hmm.
who can help hold you accountable. So he said, I'd like to submit to you every day, via email, the list of actions that I commit to complete each day.
Mm.
And he says, and then I will report to you either by the end of that day, or my insistence to him was by 9 a.m. the next morning at the very latest. I needed to hear on or before 9 a.m. about the previous day. And then he would then submit his, what was his percentage follow through?
Hmm.
Was it 100%? Was it 80%? And I wanted him to grade himself and see, okay, now if I perform at this level, because initially the first few times, we were maybe at 33% or maybe 60. And I came back to him and I said, is that a passing grade? No. Can you do better? Yes. All right. What is that going to look like? Well, I need to be stronger at my word. I need to make sure that I'm allocating and time blocking better. Time blocking being a term we use, or I use with my clients in terms of allocating time to get specific critical tasks complete in the day. So, he started to work on that. And then there were one or two times where he got his report to me late, and I said, look, this is another example of, poor accountability. I mean, your
Hmm.
commitment and promise to me was on or before 9 a.m. And so, when he started to see that, I tell you, a few corrective, I mean, non-judgmental, but, just helping him see the pattern, and he could then take that with that awareness and self-correct. He has been every single day 100% follow through every single day. And now this guy who was really kind of down on himself and low energy was saying, oh my god, this is completely transforming my entire life. I've
Yeah.
been focused with him in a business context, but he's seeing how this is just completely touching and impacting his whole life, and he's just elated now.
Yeah, that's really cool to hear that, because uh, you were talking about caught in this downward spiral,
Mhm.
and I can just so see how that can happen, where we start something, we don't quite complete it, it isn't quite good enough, and we beat up ourselves, and we try it again, we do more, we can't quite complete it. It's just we're not able to take it to that next level of performance and that next level of really total commitment. But the minute that we can take it to that point and we can see the real value of what comes from it, we can start changing the trajectory from a downward to an upward. And
Absolutely.
each time that we do more of what it is that's helping us out, it helps us get a small step forward to that. So it's an upward spiral, which can be really, I mean, it can be, well, it is life changing. It
Yeah.
has to be life changing, because without it, we stay where we're at, right?
Exactly. And, the whole point of it, it's usually some kind of limiting belief. And again, that's where, looking at, when you're stuck, what kind of limiting beliefs am I holding on to that are really reinforcing this stuck behavior, this stuck, experience? Because typically, that's again where a coach can come in and really help kind of ferret those limiting beliefs out if say a person is not able to fully see it for themselves quite yet. And so again, a lot of my work is really just supporting my clients through the process of becoming more self-aware, through questioning and through examining and some, reflective, work. And as they start to get their own ahas and begin to connect the dots for themselves, it's with that awareness then comes the empowering moment. And this is really the life transforming moment where, wow, it doesn't have to continue this way. I actually have a choice here. And ultimately, it's our choices. And I have a choice where I can either keep on doing the same old, or gosh, I could choose differently and then start to create a different kind of experience or result.
So there's one thing that we haven't really touched on yet, and that is the clarity of our vision or the clarity of our path, or the because part of I think part of what drives us is our desire, our passion to go there, and what is it that creates that? I always look at it as what is our big why? What is it that we are looking to accomplish? Maybe it's to create that perfect family, or the best family we can create. Maybe it's a business thing, whatever it is. But it seems to me that in a lot of cases, it's that lack of clarity of what it is, where we want to be, what do we want our life to look like, and creating that path. So that's part of it. But then the other part of it is the stories, the self-beat up, the history, the things that hold us back, that tell us we aren't good enough, or tell us that we can't do it, or tell us that all the stories that we tell ourselves. So do you have any thoughts on that, on either one of those paths of either the clarity of vision or the stories that we tell ourselves? Anything that you could help our listeners get maybe even if we can just trigger the thought process in the right direction to maybe get to some sort of improved state?
Yeah, oftentimes I see this because a lot of what I do is help clients with goal setting. And I often see that they're very weak in that process. And what I mean by that is they may have some kind of vague conceptual idea of what they want, but where I come in is have them really drill down. And so what's so important with your vision or with your goal is to have absolute clarity. That is the starting point. So it's drilling down and really asking some very specific questions about that vision in order to get this clarity, because without the clarity, you cannot generate the focus that's necessary in order to then move into the action that is going to make the impact and create the results. Because it's really, your vision is the future state. You're standing here, with me or with yourself, trying to say, okay, here I am in my current state. I'm not satisfied with that. I have this desired future state. Now, how do I move from my current state to that future state? And this is where getting that clarity of what that future state looks like, that vision, that goal, and then coming back into the current state and saying, okay, therefore what? Therefore, what are the actions and the behavior, the mindset that I'm going to need to take on in order to expect that I can move from my current situation and literally create through my mind, through my actions, through my behaviors, my beliefs, as I move consistently forward, taking those actions to really manifest and realize the future vision at some point in time. So having that clarity is critical. Then building in the accountability and also creating a feedback loop, and that's where, as you take action, you need to be looking at, as I take action, what is the result of that action? Is that, has that been helpful? Has that helped me move forward, or has that held me back? So you always want to be looking at that you want to build in a feedback loop. So as you're moving along, you're taking that feedback and you're able to modify and adjust your plan, so that you can get further faster towards where you're going. Because, in the beginning, you may not really know fully how you're going to move from point A to point B, and sometimes we just need to figure out what are the first 1 or 2 steps. And once you start to implement, what will happen is when you have that clarity, other resources will become, available to you, or you'll become aware of more, or, someone, be, oh, that's just what I need. But without that clarity, the greater universe does not know how to support you. So it all starts with clarity. Clarity then enables focus. Focus then creates a really sort of an ease of taking action because you're clear, you're not scattered, you're not wondering this or that. And then, I think, again, with that clarity, then what I call grace. Grace can come in and support you. It'll help provide you the people, the places, the resources that are needed for you to get where you're trying to go.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's really the awareness that there is the situation of do I want to move forward? What do I want to do? Where do I want to go? So it's the awareness. And then it's the fact of taking some sort of forward movement to that, whatever that goal is that we're aiming for. And I always look at it that a very small step even is much better than no step or a step backwards. And so over time, I think of this from as an example. I had planned on learning Spanish, and it's still on my to-do list. I will learn it at some point, but I think about it. If I had just learned 1 word a day for the last 2 years that I was planning on learning Spanish, I would know 700 or 800 700 some word. And so that would be that much further forward, but I didn't. And so just as an example, I mean, that's kind of an analogy, but if we can do something that moves us forward on a regular basis, and you mentioned something just a bit ago about accountability coaches or accountability partners, I should say. So either an accountability coach, which I think is very powerful, but even an accountability buddy. Can you share a little bit about what, if we wanted to put together, if we wanted to structure something with an accountability buddy that doesn't just fall apart a week or 2 into the effort, what would that look like? How could that be set up so that it's set up for success?
Okay. Well, first you want to start with the right type of individual for your accountability buddy. And that is going to be someone who is willing, in a non-judgmental way, to hold you and support you, be truly supportive of what it is that you're trying to achieve. Right. And, unfortunately, sometimes, we may have, big goals that we want to achieve in life, but perhaps, maybe our family members are not the best people, or at least at the starting point, at the outset, to be there. So you really want to look at, someone who is absolutely going to be in your corner of support, who will support you, but they are also strong enough, and you respect them, strongly enough that they can push back on you, and they can call you out when you are not following through, when you're not owning up to your commitments. And that, they can say that to you, again, in a constructive, non-judgmental way, but in a factual way, just like I did with my client, said, look, here's, you're not following through, you're not honoring your commitment, and I can point it out, but, yet I can still hold them in support. So you're looking for someone who has that kind of capacity. Some of my clients have actually worked with pastors, or, someone, again, outside of the family that, may be that person, or, could be a good friend.
Yeah.
But again, someone that you're going to respect and allow you to give you that feedback.
Yeah, they're doing no favors for you if they're being soft on you or not following through on you.
Exactly.
What about?
Well, you ask kind of what that might look like. For example, I've had accountability buddies in the past, and, just to give you one scenario, one example of what that might look like is, for one of them I did, and this lasted for about a year. We would get together at 9 a.m. every morning, and it was a 5-minute phone call. I mean, we were limited to 5 minutes, so it wasn't a social call, but literally every morning at 9 a.m. we got on the call, and I would account for what it is I committed to do in that previous day, done or not done, no story, done or not done,
Yeah.
percentage follow through. And then she did the same thing. And then it literally, if there was something to call out, it would just be called out, we'd take a look at that. But then it was, now it was committing to the new actions for the new day. And it was just purely an accountability call, a reporting and accounting. And, we didn't let social or, go off, so we were very focused, and that worked very, very effectively.
Well, and 2 points on that. One is that the fact that you had as a base rule or ground rule was no story. And that's so I didn't get up this morning at 5:30 because I was out late last night and I went out and did a blah, 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 blah. So it's that type of thing, or I didn't do something because, and to me, taking that story out of it, like you said, it's keeping it very short, succinct, no story, because the story is really just, it's almost not
just that. It's just the story. And actually, the more you talk about the story, the more you buy into it. So
justifying.
The story doesn't help it. And really, when you're dealing with accountability, I'm committing to follow through and complete these set of actions. It could be 1, 2, 3, whatever, but it's either done, complete, or it's not done. Even if I'm 85% complete and I didn't get it done, it is not done. I did not complete that task.
Yep.
All right. So it's a very clear distinction there.
Yep. But you completed it to 85%, period. Right. I mean, so it wasn't 60%, it wasn't 100%, but what it is, it's factual. It's to the point.
But it's not done. I mean, and basically in my accounting, I failed at that, because so if I committed to say 3 actions that, critical actions that I was committing to complete in that day, and now I'm coming into my accounting with my accountability buddy. Maybe I got 2 out of the 3 complete, but and even if I got 85% on that third one, it is incomplete, because complete is, I would say, 95 to 100%.
Gotcha.
I give you a little leeway there.
Yeah.
But the idea, again, we're building that accountability muscle. And so we're not allowing for the story, the excuses, the rationalizations. And so, and then to give myself a grade, well, I got 2 out of 3, 66%, and I got to sit with that stage. It's like,
right.
That's not me, I'm not a 66% performer. And, it really makes, but when you sit in that and you recognize, but the data doesn't lie, and I'm just, the facts don't lie. So yesterday I basically performed at 66% at what I committed to do. Yeah. And when you start to hold that in front of you, and what we call that is the accountability hot seat, you put yourself in the accountability hot seat every single day. I guarantee you, if you're serious, you're going to build some strong accountability muscle.
Absolutely. And so the second point of it was the accountability partner that is also asking to be held accountable. I think that there's value in that. Have you experienced one over the other, like whether you're going to someone who is going to be your accountability partner but has not asked for the same in return? Do you think there's any value one way or the other, or is it just dependent?
Yeah. So, I mean, if they're not asking for the same, that's okay. As long, because really your objective is to find that person who is willing to be that support for you, and that accountability support for you. Whatever they've got going on in their lives is their business. Who knows? They may have their own accountability buddy or coach or someone that they're working with.
Yeah.
But, so that doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be, both of you. Your objective is to find that person that is willing to, is strong enough and that you respect well enough that, is willing to give you the feedback when you need it, to really support you. You'll be your cheerleader when you're doing well, to also call you out, and, hold you in the poop, so to speak, when you don't. And then help you grow and develop that accountability muscle.
Absolutely. No, this is great. So we've given some tips for people to actually get started on right away, things that we can work on right from here on. What do you have? I like to ask guests if they have a certain book or any sort of a resource that they recommend, whether it's directly related to the topic that we discuss or not.
Yeah.
Is there any sort of a book or resource that you think the audience would get benefit from?
I do, in fact, and I really didn't get to talking about it, in this podcast, or conversation. But I do want to really stress again, for someone who's looking to become more productive and more accountable in their lives, starting your day out with either a morning kind of ritual or a morning practice that is really designed to support you and nurture you and get you in the framework to then step into the greater part of your life where you're engaged with the rest of the world, and where you're going to be following through on commitments. Having for me personally, this is a huge piece of what I consider my success strategy, and that is having this morning routine. And one of the books that I came across, it's funny, in my coaching, oftentimes I get themes, and so there may be someone brings something up, and then I hear it again from another client, and then another client. And a couple of years ago, I kept hearing about this book. I've always had my morning ritual and my morning routine, but I kept hearing about this book. I'm just gonna pull this over and see if I can show it to you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's called The Miracle Morning. The Not So Obvious Secret Guaranteed to Transform Your Life Before 8 a.m.
Okay.
By Hal Elrod.
Mm-hmm.
And it's it's not a big book. It's a quick read, but he does a great job breaking down, well, first describing what that is, why it's so critical, and how impactful it is for not just your business, but your life. But it is really with the idea that you give to yourself first. So that
Mm-hmm.
first part of the day is about taking good care of you. And I like to, we have that analogy of the cup, and the cup runneth over. Well, my morning ritual, my morning routine is about me filling up my own cup first.
Mm-hmm.
And then as I take care of me and give myself that time to nurture and take care of me. And for me, that's my exercise, that's my meditation and prayer time, that's my affirmation, time to really sit and experience my affirmations. It may be where I do some reading or some research on something of interest to myself, or journaling. But again, Hal Elrod in his book kind of lays out a whole process and helps you understand how to build that habit. Even if you think, oh, well, I'm not a morning person, and
Mm-hmm.
that would never work for me. Well, he'll debunk that real quickly for you.
Okay.
And so I would recommend that, as a,
Mm-hmm.
again, as a way to really bump up and improve. If you don't have a good morning routine,
Mm-hmm.
really take a look at that and see
Okay.
how you can start your day, and that will set the frame really for a high productive, high achieving day for the rest of the day.
Got it. Okay. Great. Well, this has been really helpful. Thank you for taking the time. I've really enjoyed this conversation. And
Thank you.
if anybody is interested in reaching out to you, how might they connect with you? Is there a way for them to reach you?
Yeah, I have to, in the process of rebuilding my website. So they could reach out to me at just Coherence Coaching, one word, Coherence Coaching at mac.com.
Okay.
And I'm also on LinkedIn, Mary Beltrami, Beltrami. You can connect with me via LinkedIn. And for now, I'd say those would be the two best ways to connect with me. And then from there, I can connect with you and see where we want to go.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much, Mary. Really appreciate you taking the time. And thank you, listeners and viewers. If you have any suggestions, any comments, any ways that any topics that you'd like us to cover on this podcast, would love to hear from you. Just send me an email, tom@tombraegelmann.com, and I'd be happy to bring in any guests that you suggest. I'll do my best to get that guest or the topic covered based on suggestions you have. So that's it for this episode of Bang Free Blueprint, and thank you again, Mary.
You're welcome. Be well and thrive, Tom.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.